Everything began to fall apart on an afternoon in November, when Seattle was just starting to feel the first chill of the season. That day, Ethan came home earlier than usual. He didn't call me like he normally did, nor did he text me to say he was on his way. I was still busy scrubbing the kitchen floor when I heard the front door slam so hard that our wedding photo on the wall rattled slightly. I rushed to the living room, ready to smile and ask him what he wanted for dinner, but the question froze on my lips the moment I met Ethan's bloodshot eyes. That look sent a chill down my spine. For the first time, I didn't see the man who once whispered, "I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." He threw his briefcase onto the couch, his voice hoarse. "The company's bankrupt. Everything's gone. Do you understand, Liz? It's all gone." I stood there stunned, feeling like I'd just stepped on a slick patch of ice. I hadn't even managed to ask anything when Ethan hissed, "You stay at home all day, besides cooking and cleaning, what else can you do? Can you help me shoulder this?" I stammered, "Ethan, I'm sorry. He laughed, a dry, bitter laugh that seemed to pour all his resentment onto my shoulders. "Sorry? You think sorry will bring everything back? Who's going to take care of you now? Where's the money to pay the mortgage, the credit cards? Do you think I still have the strength to keep providing for you?" I didn't dare argue, just lowered my head, my hand clutching the hem of my sweater so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. I knew he was desperate, falling apart. I wanted to hold him, to say I would find a way, get a job again, fight through this with him. But his eyes looked at me then like I was nothing more than excess baggage. In the days that followed, the house grew heavier with tension. Ethan lost all his calm demeanor. He smoked in the living room, beer cans scattered everywhere. I kept cooking, kept cleaning, kept whispering to myself, "It will get better." But every night I heard him on the phone with someone, his voice pleading, "Give me more time to pay, I'll get the money." I knew then he had reached the end of the road. Then one night snow covered the front yard in white. I had just finished folding a pile of winter sweaters when I heard pounding on the bedroom door. Ethan stood there, a stack of bills in his hand. He threw them at my feet, papers scattering across the cold tile floor. Look at all this we have to pay. How are you going to pay for it? I don't have my salary anymore. Do you? Can you support me?" I knelt down to pick them up, my voice trembling. "Ethan, I'll go back to work. I still have some savings." "Savings?" he snarled, his eyes darkening as if ready to burn me alive. "You're good, huh? Hiding things from me. Fine, bring it all out. Give me every last cent, then get the hell out of this house." I was stunned. That "get the hell out" echoed in my head like thunder in the snowy night. I bit my lip, but I didn't cry. I quietly stood up and walked to the kitchen. I pulled the old tin box down from the top shelf. Inside was all the cash, savings books, and a few investment documents I had hidden away. I knew that if I gave him everything, tomorrow I would have nothing left. But I also knew, if I didn't leave now, I would lose more than money. I would lose myself. I turned back and handed him the box. Ethan snatched it, tore it open, rummaged through it, counting every bill, his eyes wild with greed. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he lunged at me, grabbing my shoulders, his breath reeking of alcohol. "What else are you hiding? Tell me everything. You worthless woman." I pushed him away. For the first time in my life I screamed back, "That's enough, Ethan. I have nothing left to give you. If you want me gone, fine, I'll go." He froze, then burst out laughing, a cruel, echoing laugh filling the freezing house. "Go where? Who would take you in? Who would pity a useless wife like you? Go on, get out. Don't ever come crawling back here." I didn't say another word. I walked to the bedroom, quietly packed a few clothes into a small suitcase. The sound of the wheels dragging across the tile floor was like the wind howling outside the porch. I opened the door and stepped out. The icy wind cut into my skin, snow covered the steps. I heard the door slam shut behind me. One slam ended all the vows of love that once were. In the white snow, I gripped the suitcase handle tightly, the inside pocket of my coat still hiding a few important papers he hadn't gotten his hands on. My flat soaked through with freezing water, yet strangely my heart felt weightless. I had once thought losing Ethan meant losing everything. But at that very moment I realized I was only just beginning to be free. That night, Seattle was bone-chilling cold. Snow fell so thick that each step I took sank deep, leaving scattered footprints as evidence of a life that had closed behind that iron door. I dragged my suitcase down the empty street, my breath turning into thin white mist in front of me. In the pocket of my old coat besides my ID, I held tight to the most important papers. Savings books, investment account statements, a bank card in my maiden name. Elizabeth Carter, that Ethan never knew about. For years I had lived like a shadow, quietly saving up spare change, then secretly turning it into small investments. It started with a few shares from my old law firm, where I worked as a secretary. On nights when Ethan was on business trips, I stayed up studying finance, researching the market, trading stocks. The meager profits grew over time, along with the freelance translation gigs, and soon I had more than just a hidden stash. What Ethan always mocked as pocket change was now enough for me to live a different life without clinging to anyone. I found a small hotel near the city's main bus station. The front desk clerk looked at me, a woman with messy hair, a snow-dusted coat, dragging an old suitcase, and sighed with pity. He didn't know the bedraggled woman before him had just walked out of a luxurious mansion, and more importantly, I was no longer anyone's useless wife. I rented a single room, tiny but clean. Dropping my suitcase on the wooden floor, I sat down on the edge of the bed, took off my soaking wet shoes, my feet raw from the cold. My hands trembling, I spread the papers out on the crisp white sheets. Seeing the numbers in the savings books, I could hardly believe someone like me had come this far. Nearly $300,000 spread across 3 different banks, a portfolio of stocks yielding steady returns, and a savings account in my maiden name, Elizabeth Carter, opened before I ever took Ethan's last name. I laughed to myself. All those years I lived with my head bowed under the roof Ethan so proudly called the home he built. Turns out I never really belonged to that house. I was the one who built the safest shelter for myself. This money, and the strength Ethan never bothered to see. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sorted through every paper, checked my online accounts, and made a list of everything I needed to do. I would withdraw all the money from the old savings accounts and consolidate it into one bank. I would find a small, cozy apartment near the city center so I could easily get around and start fresh with a new job. Most importantly, I would live under my true name, Elizabeth Carter, no longer bound by my ex-husband's last name. At dawn, I pulled open the curtain and watched the snow quietly cover the rooftops of Seattle. This city didn't care that someone like me had just lost the place I once called home. But this very city, over the years, had quietly nurtured my resolve, a woman who seemed fragile yet could build her own hidden treasure. The next morning, I stepped into the city's biggest bank. Clutching my file folder, I took a deep breath. When the banker asked, "What would you like to do with this money, ma'am?" I smiled, my voice light but my eyes bright like the early winter sun. "I want to consolidate it and open a business account. I'm about to start my own company." The bank teller paused for a moment. Perhaps she didn't understand why a skinny woman dressed so simply could say something like that with such certainty. But I knew. Only I knew how long I had waited to say those words. 3 days later, I left the small hotel, holding the keys to my newly rented apartment in a mid-range complex. The place was barely larger than my old living room, but to me it was a whole new beginning. I turned one corner into a temporary office, set up an old wooden desk, placed my laptop and papers on it, then started calling some of my old contacts from the law firm. Within a week, I landed my first service contract, translating legal documents for a newly established law firm. It was a small deal, but to me, it felt like the first candle lighting up the darkness. Each night I worked late. Unlike before, I no longer feared footsteps outside my door, nor contemptuous stares or angry words over a messy dinner table. I cooked for myself, cleaned for myself, and watched the snow fall through the living room window. For the first time in years, life felt light, but solid because I knew I was in control of everything, including myself. Inside, I still carried the scar from that snowy night. But every morning, when I looked in the mirror and met the gaze of the woman in it, I whispered, "Elizabeth Carter, from now on, no one has the right to kick you out of anywhere ever again." Those first days in my small apartment weren't easy. Seattle remained its usual gray and damp self, bone-chilling cold. Sometimes I'd find myself remembering the warmth of that old kitchen, only to shake my head and push the thought away. I no longer allowed myself to look back. Every morning I brewed a strong pot of coffee, opened my laptop, and dove into a sea of emails, phone calls, and documents. I worked non-stop, translating legal files, drafting contract templates for newly launched law firms, and editing complicated clauses that small companies couldn't afford to have full-time lawyers handle. One task followed another. By day, I was a remote legal assistant. By night, I studied how to establish a professional legal consulting and translation business, the dream I'd nurtured back when I used to hole up in the copy room at my old firm. My first clients were mostly old colleagues or law offices I had worked with before. They appreciated my thoroughness and responsiveness, so one referral led to another. Even when the early contracts only paid a few $100s, I accepted them without hesitation. I needed credibility first. Money would follow. There were nights when I was so exhausted I collapsed over my pile of documents. Staring at the bare white wall, I would ask myself, why start from zero when I could have just stayed home cooking? But the answer always came clear, because I understood the value of freedom. The kind of freedom I paid for with my obedient youth, with endless arguments, and with that snowy night. I couldn't, and would never again, go back to that gilded cage called being a good wife. 3 months later, I officially registered the company name, Carter Legal and Translation Services. Even though I was still the only employee, I rented a tiny office on the 5th floor of an old building in downtown Seattle. On the window hung a simple plastic sign, Elizabeth Carter, Legal Consultant and Translator. The day I put up that sign, I stood in the drafty hallway for a long time. My chest swelled with pride. After years of being labeled a freeloader wife, Ethan White's shadow, now they would have to remember my real name, Elizabeth Carter, founder of a legitimate company, earning her own way. This city doesn't easily forgive weakness. No one had time to care who I was or how I got thrown out of my home. The only thing keeping me afloat was the quality of my work. I processed files quickly, on time, and without a single mistake. Clients came once, then returned, and brought others with them. Each time I signed a new contract, I treated myself to an overpriced coffee. As a reminder, you earned every penny of this, Elizabeth. A year went by. Carter Legal and Translation Services went from a no-name to a trusted brand among Seattle's legal and translation circles. I hired a part-time assistant, then a junior translator. The tiny office grew cramped, and I started considering a larger space. But I wasn't in a rush. I had learned the most important lesson. Wealth isn't just money, it's being in control of your life, your time, and your decisions. Every now and then, I'd hear news about Ethan. He'd sunk deeper into debt and was now crashing at a friend's place. Someone once asked me if I regretted leaving him when he was down. I just smiled. I didn't leave anyone, he threw me out. And lucky for me, he had no idea he'd also kicked out the so-called useless wife, along with the fortune she had quietly built over the years. One late evening, after signing a major contract with an international law firm, I stopped at a quiet bar by Lake Washington. I ordered a glass of red wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city glittering under the night sky. I thought about how far I'd come, from a woman trembling on her doorstep, cast out by her husband in the dead of winter, to someone confidently signing 5-figure contracts. Everything had changed because I dared to believe I wasn't worthless. Amid the chatter and laughter around me, I pulled out my phone and opened my bank app to check the balance, now 10 times what it was that first day. I smiled softly, raised my glass, and whispered, "Congratulations, Elizabeth Carter. You're finally living like a queen. No one had to crown you but yourself." The day Ethan showed up at the door of my new office, Seattle had just endured a chilling spring rain. Droplets still clung to the glass windows, reflecting the weary figure of the man I once called husband, now disheveled, rain-soaked, and with hair matted from the storm. I was reviewing a service contract with an international law firm when Mia, my new assistant, knocked on the door and whispered, "There's a man, he says he's your ex-husband. He insists on seeing you." I put my pen down, letting my eyes rest for a few seconds on the cold cup of coffee. Ethan White. That name, that voice, used to be my entire world, one I thought I could never leave. Yet now, hearing it from someone else's mouth, it felt distant, like an old tale faded in my memory. I nodded. Let him in. When Ethan stepped through the door, I saw him flinch at the bright, tidy space and the gentle scent of essential oils. A place with no trace of a wife quietly picking up beer cans or washing shirts thrown on the floor. Place that was mine alone. He sat across from me, eyes darting around the file cabinets, the whiteboard filled with meeting schedules, then stopping at the small nameplate on the corner of my desk. Elizabeth Carter, founder and CEO. He cleared his throat, his voice hoarse, as if he had to force each word out. Liz. I need to talk. I stayed silent, studying the man who once threw me out into the snow in the middle of the night. The arrogant man from back then, now trembling in the cold. His thin hand gripping the strap of a worn-out backpack. If I were the woman I was 3 years ago, I might have burst into tears, rushed to him, urged him to take off his wet coat, poured him hot tea. But the woman I am now just sat still, hands loosely clasped on my desk. He looked up, eyes red. I lost my job. The company went bankrupt. I owe too much, can't borrow from anyone anymore. The house is mortgaged too. Liz, I know I was wrong, but please help me this one time. I'll start over, I just need you to. I raised an eyebrow. Just need you to. Plea that sounded like a command. I'd heard it too many times. I gently pushed toward him the warm tea Mia had brought in, then sat up straight, as calm as if facing a client. How much do you need? He looked startled. Maybe Ethan hadn't expected me to ask so directly. He looked down at the floor, voice choked. About $50,000. I know for you, that's not a lot. I promise I'll pay you back. I let out a soft laugh, cutting him off. You know, for me that's not a lot. Yet back then you yelled at me for not making even $100 a month. Do you remember that? Ethan lowered his head. I saw his shoulders tremble. Though my heart no longer ached the way it once did, a tiny bitterness still slipped through a crack in my chest, but I didn't let it grow. I stood up, walked to the window, looking at Seattle blurred in the rain. I spoke slowly, as if reminding myself. I don't hate you, Ethan. The day you threw me out, you gave me the most precious thing. Freedom. You don't need to apologize because I should thank you too. Without you, I'd have kept my head down, living the life of a dutiful wife, never becoming Elizabeth Carter like I am now. I turned around, catching the bewildered, humiliated, and desperate look in his eyes. A once proud man, now just a beggar for pity. But I had nothing left to give. My pity had run dry that snowy night years ago. I walked back to my desk, opened a drawer and pulled out a blank check. I picked up my pen and wrote the amount, $5,000. Just enough for him to eat, find a new job, not starve on the street. I signed it Elizabeth Carter, not White. I placed the check in front of him. This is the last thing you'll ever get from me. I'm not your savior, Ethan. You have to save yourself, just like I did. Ethan quietly took the check. I couldn't tell if he was crying or if the rain outside had soaked his face. All I knew was that when he stood up, his frail shoulders shook, and when the door closed behind him, I felt a strange emptiness in my heart, but it wasn't regret, it was relief. Mia peeked in, seeing me standing silently by the window. She asked softly, "Are you okay?" I turned around and smiled. A genuine smile, the most peaceful one I'd ever had. I'm okay. From now on, everything is okay. After seeing Ethan again, I no longer cared about the past. I didn't wonder how he was living, how he was paying off his debts, or if he had found a new way out. Each morning, I cared only about which new milestone Carter Legal and Translation Services would reach next. The company was no longer a tiny office cramped with files and a printer roaring all night. I leased an entire floor in a glass tower in downtown Seattle, overlooking the city skyline. Every morning when I drew the blinds, sunlight would flood the conference room, shining on new contracts waiting for my signature. I hired more staff, translators, legal advisors, client service reps, a software team to optimize the online service process. I wanted my company to be more than just a place that received documents and delivered translations. It had to be a launch pad for fledgling law firms, immigrant businesses, startups needing affordable legal protection. Clients from Canada, the UK, Australia, even Asia, began appearing through cold emails and handshakes at international conferences. I traveled a lot, attending law summits, startup expos. Each time I stepped on stage to speak, I saw in the audience the eyes of women, some very young, some older than me, listening to the story of a woman once thrown out of her home with nothing but empty hands. They don't need a fancy speech. They need to see a living proof that a woman who once seemed fragile can stand up, build her own little empire, and answer the world with actions instead of tears. Once, after I finished a talk at a conference in Toronto, an Asian girl came up to me, shyly asking, "Miss Elizabeth, my husband left me too, with 2 little kids. I have no money and no idea where to start. Do you think I can be like you?" I didn't lie to her with empty promises. I put my hand on her shoulder, looked straight into the eyes of a girl trembling with fear and hope. "You won't become me, but you will become the strongest version of yourself. Start by believing in your own worth first." When I returned to Seattle, a series of financial newspapers reported on a new partnership deal between Carter Legal and Translation Services and a major automated translation tech group in Europe. Many people were surprised because I, once just a small paperwork service owner, had skillfully leveraged technology to multiply productivity tenfold while keeping the expert-level quality intact. Investors started calling me Elizabeth the Phoenix reborn from the ashes of marriage. I don't like that nickname. I'm not a phoenix. I'm the woman who once got kicked out of her own house and built a new door for herself. Stronger, better, truly mine. One late summer afternoon, I sat in my office bathed in sunset light, looking at a long list of calls and emails. Mia, now the chief operating officer, walked in, dropped off a stack of files and smiled. "You have an interview with a global women's magazine tomorrow night. They want you to share your secrets for balancing work and life." I laughed and shook my head. "Just answer for me. I don't balance anything. I just pick what matters most and give it my all." Mia laughed too. She was once a fresh graduate shyly asking me for her first chance. Now she's my right hand, the one who keeps the team running when I'm away from the office. Before leaving, Mia turned back and asked, "Do you plan to write a book? I think a lot of women out there really need your story." I didn't answer right away. I looked at the wall covered in photos. Me with my multicultural teams, signing partnership deals, smiling over a cup of coffee after a speech. In my eyes back then, from a cold, cheap apartment, and my eyes now, I still see the same stubborn woman who refuses to let anyone define her worth. I softly said, "Maybe I will write it. But first I want to open another office in Asia. There are so many women there who were like me once. They need a job, an opportunity to know they're not worthless." Mia nodded. She knows well. When I say I'll do something, I will do it. When night falls, I close my laptop and leave the office for the day. Seattle sparkles like a galaxy below the high-rise building. I pull my coat tighter, grab my bag, and smile at my reflection in the hallway glass. "Thank you, Elizabeth Carter. Because you didn't give up back then, you now have a bigger world waiting for you to conquer." 3 years later, I stand in the vast hall of an international forum for women and entrepreneurship. Behind me the words read, "She rises, women who rebuild their lives from zero." Hundreds of women from different countries sit quietly, listening to me tell the story of a small American girl, once shivering on a snowy street at night, clutching the only suitcase that held memories now worthless. I tell them about the day I chose between resentment and forgiveness. About the first big contract I signed, my hands trembling in fear of being cheated. About the countless sleepless nights translating documents while teaching myself law so no one could ever take advantage of me again. When I pause, a long round of applause echoes. In the crowd, I see Mia in the front row, her eyes red. Next to her is Ellen, the woman I once gave free legal advice to when her husband kicked her out with 2 small children. Now Ellen owns a popular bakery on Main Street, employs over 10 people, and stands firmly on her own. They, the women who have risen and will keep rising from the rubble, are the reason I never stop. After the talk, a reporter rushes over for an interview. Elizabeth, many people call you the Steel Rose. Do you think that name fits you? I laugh, a genuine laugh with nothing left to hide. I'm not sure if I'm steel or even still a rose. I just know I was once fragile, trampled on, and I replanted myself stronger, tougher. If they want to call me that, so be it. The reporter asks again. Do you ever regret not forgiving your ex-husband, Ethan? Pause for a second. In my mind, Ethan's image flickers by like an old film. The once sweet man, then cold, then broken and begging for money. I answer calmly like I'm talking about a stranger. I don't hate him and I didn't forgive him. I just left him in the past. Everything has its price. And I've paid mine in full. I left the convention center as the late afternoon sun poured down the street. A group of young women were waiting for me at the gate, lining up for autographs and photos. One whispered, "You gave me the courage to leave the man who abused me for 10 years. I squeezed her hand, looking into her eyes the way I once looked into my own face on that snowy night. You deserve freedom. Ethan's old house. Now it's just an old house with a for sale sign. I stood at a distance, looking at it through the rotten wooden fence, not stepping any closer. Those steps where I once knelt to scrub my husband's muddy shoes. The door that slammed shut on me on the coldest night of my life. Now it's just an empty shell. I smiled faintly. That house used to be my whole world. Now it's just a building waiting for a buyer. And I have a bigger world opening up for me every single day. I pulled out my phone and called Mia. Get ready for my trip to Vietnam, then Thailand, then the Philippines. I want to open more branches in Southeast Asia. Mia's voice was bright on the other end. Planning to light up half the world again, huh? I laughed, walking into the cool spring night, leaving that old house behind. A place that, even if it burned to ashes, could never burn me again. I don't light up the world. I just plant the spark. The rest is up to them. The next morning I returned to the office like any other day. A group of Syrian immigrant women were waiting for job interviews. I brewed tea for them myself, explained the work, listened to their timid voices filled with hope. In their eyes I saw a glimpse of my first days. Confused, yet believing in something greater than fate. As I walked them out, I looked up at the vast Seattle sky. No more freezing winter nights, no more harsh words, no more tears shed for someone unworthy. I am still Elizabeth. Stubborn, free, and full of fire. And I know there will be many more women who stand up, grow strong, and replant themselves, inspired by my story. Elizabeth's story is proof that a woman, no matter how hurt, betrayed, or abandoned, can still rise up and build her own empire and happiness. In reality, so many women out there still endure silently, afraid to lose their so-called security, forgetting that true worth lies in their own will and effort. Elizabeth shows us that if you dare to let go of the past, believe in your own abilities, and persist step by step, anyone can rise brilliantly from their own ashes. What do you think about Elizabeth's journey of resilience? Share your thoughts or perspectives on this story. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, love, and family.